I know I'm a little late to the game with this eyeshadow palette. It did release about a week ago, and we're doing it anyway. We're doing a review of the Natasha Denona Bloom Palette, which is brand new to Natasha Denona. So let's get into this video. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to today's video. If you're new here, my name is Staci. I do unfiltered makeup opinions, honest reviews. I have tutorials, and we also have the unfiltered series, and I also have the eyeshadow series, which is this series right here where I do deep dives into eyeshadow palettes. I just recently reviewed for you guys Beauty Below by Blend Bunny Cosmetics, and now we have the Natasha Denona Bloom eyeshadow palette. Let's get into swatches, information about this eyeshadow palette, and I will include swatches in natural light and also in studio lighting so you guys can see the difference, and also what the palette looks like in natural lighting as well as in studio lighting. The Natasha Denona Bloom palette is currently available on Sephora. It is also available on Ulta, and it is also available on the Natasha Denona website. And on the Natasha Denona website, you can save 15% with my code XoXo Staci Roberge, and that is affiliated. I do get a little bit of a kickback, but if you wanted to purchase it directly from Natasha Denona, you do get 15% off, which is actually a pretty good deal if you ask me. About the eyeshadow palette, it retails for $69 USD. It is a 15-pan eyeshadow palette. It's in her MIDI series of palettes. I have a whole bunch of her MIDI palettes now, and the quality of her palettes are usually very blendable, pigmented, easy to use, and she has really fun eyeshadow stories as well. And you can actually go over to her website and see like tutorials with these different eyeshadow palettes, which I think is really fun as well. Capturing the essence of blooming flowers and the radiance of sunny days, Natasha introduces the Bloom eyeshadow palette. 15 brand new warm-toned floral hues, peachy corals, rich burgundies, and complementing mauves in her unmatched standard setting formulas. It showcases a warm-hued assortment of all new shades in her iconic pro-level, user-friendly formulas. It has 6 buttery, creamy mattes, 2 ultra-blendable silky mattes, 2 high-shine metallics, and 5 dazzling, sparkling foil shades, including Equinox, which is a groundbreaking peach-toned duochromatic with a mesmerizing turquoise blue shift and a truly unique shimmer finish. It has bold reds, coral browns, and soft nude apricots. It is a spring must-have that offers a versatile range of warm tones to create everything from soft, sparkling doll eyes to bold, expressive glam looks. Crafted with Natasha's signature formulas, the floral-inspired MIDI palette delivers professional quality results for entry level. On Natasha Denona's website, you do get free shipping with this eyeshadow palette because it is over the $49 price point threshold, even with the 50% off discount code that I have. Let's get into a first look with this eyeshadow palette and then do some comparisons for you guys with other palettes that I pulled out of my collection, so some that are compared to Natasha Denona and some other brands as well. All right, I'm going to prime my lids with the eyeshadow base primer stick from Sigma Beauty in the shade Ignite. This is like my go-to eyeshadow primer now. It's very okay. Here we have the eyeshadow palette. Ain't she lovely? She's a lot of peach tones in here. I did see some kind of like berry tones in here as well. I don't feel like I have an eyeshadow palette from Natasha Denona that specifically fits this, but I do feel like I've seen like this brick shade before. And I feel like I've seen like this shade before, and the Equinox shade kind of reminds me of the shade from, I think it's in like the mini retro and then in like the mini starlit or something. So I'm going to have to look at that, but we're going to create an eyeshadow look with this. First, going to use a EO3 from Singe Beauty. I'm going to take the mirror cover off because like, yeah, I love taking the little covers off. So we're going to actually dip into Petal. This is like a very nude shade. I'm just going to use this to apply just a very light dusting all over the eye. It is really pretty though. I've actually thought about doing like almost an entire matte look and then accentuating the inner corner. I don't know. I'm not really a matte person, but we might do that today. I'm going to start with this shade Ren. This is like a pink. Honestly, it reminds me of like a pink mauve shade. Actually, that's more of like a peachy pink. In pan, it almost looks like pink, peachy mauve. This one's like it's like a pinkish peach. Really pretty. Very pigmented, definitely have to say that. Like, you dip into this a little bit and you do get a lot of pigment on your brush. I am going to use my Sigma switch to just switch between colors. That way, if I want to use that brush again, I can. I'm going to use the Cinch Beauty EO2, and I'm going to dip into Clover. This is like a purple shade. I feel like I've seen this purple in like the Love palette, or like even the Love Face palette. I feel like I've seen this shade before. The shadows are so dusty. Can you see that? Like, it's super dusty, but they are pretty pigmented. I've never had a Natasha Denona shadow be that dusty before. Her purple shades are pretty good. I do have the Rocha palette, and I do have a full video of the Rocha palette up on my channel. And those pigments were really, really good in purple. It did not, I don't think it said anything about whether or not she used like the same technology as what she did for some of the purple shades in this palette. This is definitely purple. I feel like I've seen this color before. I'm just kind of like diffusing this shade onto the inner corner. I'm not applying extra. It's just whatever is left over on the brush. We're applying it to like all over the lid, but it's mostly concentrated on the outer corner of the eye. I'm going to do something I traditionally don't do. I'm going to spray my face, and then we're going to put on that Equinox shade, which is supposed to be like a duochrome. I want to see if that's going to help apply. Just like on the lids. It's going to give it a nice like tacky base to it. And I'm going to just dip into this. This one, it's not very metallic. It's very much like glittery. I'm going to place this on kind of like in the middle. That's where we're placing it. I want to see if this really has like a duochrome effect to it. And typically duochromes will kind of pop better when you have like a darker base underneath. Sometimes they tend to pop better, at least in my experience with really good duochromes. So it is like a scattered light type of eyeshadow. The other shadows in here are a lot more foily. I'm just gonna swatch this one. As you can see, that's like a lot more foily. This one's really pretty. It has a lot more of a glitter in it. This would make a really pretty inner corner highlight. Oh yeah. So I'm gonna use Crisp, which is this shade right here. I'm gonna use it on the inner corner. Just gonna spray my brush. We're using a Sigma Beauty pencil brush, and I'm just gonna pop this on the inner corner. I mean, literally we've used like 4 shadows, so that makes me happy. I'm going back in with the EO3, and I am gonna use that Petal shade one more time, just very lightly tapping, and then we're going to put this on the brow bone. And then I'm going to go a little old school, and I'm going to take that pencil brush with Crisp, just a slight tap, and we're going to put this on and make a brow bone like highlight like that. Super subtle highlight, like nothing to write home about, like just super subtle. Okay, I'm going to put on the rest of my face, and then we'll do the under portion of the eyes, and we'll see how this whole makeup look is looking. Okay, we have the upper lash line done with mascara. Before I apply my mascara on my lower lash line, I am going to take a little bit of that Clover shade, tap it off, and lightly dust this on the lower lash line. And then I'm going to take my pencil brush and just dip into Crisp again and bring this into the lower lash line a little as well. Okay, so here's the completed eyeshadow look with the new Bloom palette from Natasha Denona. Something super sultry today, and I wanted to use that new duochrome to see like how it performed and how it worked. But this is what the final eyeshadow look is. It's like super sultry and romantic. I do like it. I was actually, okay, I'm sitting here putting on my mascara. I'm like, you know what this palette really reminds me of? The Icon palette from Makeup Revolution, which is a nod to the Patrick Ta Major Dimension 2 eyeshadow palette. So we're going to hop into some comparisons, and then I'm going to give you my final thoughts at the end of this video. Man, my makeup is on point today, though. Like, look how pretty my face makeup looks. It is snatched. It is good. It is pretty. It is like springish. It's romantic springish. I like it. I wanted to pull out some comparison palettes for you guys so you can see what this looks like compared to some already released Natasha Denona palettes. So here we have the Bloom palette, very peachy. Let's look at, I have a couple of, one of them was a BoxyCharm eyeshadow palette. This is the Peak palette from Natasha Denona. And I was actually looking at the comparison between the Peak palette and the Bloom palette, and there are a lot of similarities, like this shade right here, very similar to this shade right here, very similar to this shade right here, very similar to like the foilier shade, this shade, very similar to this shade, very similar to this shade. So actually the color story in the Peak palette is really, really similar. This is like a companion palette, I want to say, more than anything. Typically I will do like comparison swatch videos. That's like a more in-depth comparison swatch. If you want to see that, leave me a comment down below and I will get that up. I've done it with the Natasha Denona Rocha palette. I did it with the I Need a Nude palette. And the next eyeshadow palette, it's a mini palette, but I wanted to pull this one out as well. And that is the mini Starlit palette. This one actually had like peach undertones in it. I was looking at the comparison between these two, and I did notice that while it does have those peach undertones, it does have more of those like purplish mauvish shades. But this shade right here is called Galaxia, and it really reminded me of Equinox. So these ones are similar kind of companions. This shade right here definitely would fit into this palette because it's like that peachy tone to it. So that is the mini Starlit palette. I do not have the I Need a Warm palette, but I do have the I Need a Nude palette. And a lot of people have been comparing the Bloom palette to the I Need a Warm palette, but I thought I would just pull out like the I Need a Nude. I Need a Nude is like super cool toned. This has definitely got a peachy undertone to it with some pinks and like a little bit of like a purpley pink in there. So they are definitely different. Next, I have the Golden palette, which this is completely gold themed. Definitely more warm toned with those warm browns in there. And it does not have any kind of peach undertone at all. But I thought I would pull it out anyway so that you guys can see the comparison between the two. So definitely not at all a dupe or anything like that, but just thought I'd pull it out for you. Next, I have the Love palette. This is an older Natasha Denona palette. It is like purples and pinks. So this one, some of the colors in this palette reminded me of some of the colors in the Bloom palette. So let's just take a look at these. I still feel like this pulls way more warm, whereas this has a lot more like bright poppy purple shades. This shade right here though does look reminiscent of this shade. And then some of like the pink tone shades, they are more pink tone though. They're not like orangey peachy. So they are a little similar, but not like tit for tat. They don't look exactly similar. And then I did want to pull out the Natasha Denona Rocha palette because I felt like there was a purple shade in this eyeshadow palette that was really similar to specifically Clover. And that Equinox shade reminded me of some of the shades in the Rocha palette, but still like definitely purple, definitely peach. Like this shade or this shade right here is similar to this shade up here. And then possibly like this one is similar to Equinox, but it's a little hit and go there. Not a lot of similarities between these two. So I actually wanted to pull out the Retro Glam palette and put it up against the Bloom palette. Obviously the Retro Glam has a lot of those tones in it that are more green, but I was thinking like these shades here really do match up with some of the Bloom. This shade right here looks like this shade up here. And then it doesn't, I mean, it has this dark brown shade, which is more of a cool tone brown. This one's more warm tone leaning. So it has some similarities, but again, not a lot of similarities. Like there are not a lot of them. All of those were Natasha Denona. And then I was thinking about this eyeshadow palette, which is the True Icon palette from Makeup Revolution, which is actually a nod to the Major Dimension 2 by Patrick Ta. And this one, I definitely can see a resemblance with the shades because they're like that burnt, like peachy tone, very warm tone. I definitely think that this could be comparable to the Natasha Denona Bloom palette. I 100% think it could be comparable to that. So this is the one I'm most excited to do comparison swatches to, and I definitely think it's comparable. This one is only technically 14 shades, but we do have 2 creams in there, so technically it's 12 shades as opposed to 15 shades in the Bloom palette. But I honestly think that there's going to be quite a few similarities between the two, like just looking at them side by side. So if you guys want to see a swatch comparison video, definitely leave me a comment down below. Make sure you're subscribed. Final thoughts on this eyeshadow palette. I like the way that Natasha really designed the cover herself. She was doing watercolor. She actually posted like the entire story up on their Instagram. I think the story is really interesting. She was getting back into her watercolor roots. I think that the front cover I think it's beautiful. It reminds me of spring. I really like the concept of like this warm, peachy type of palette. I think it's if you're the type of person who wants to dabble into color, and this gives you like a comfortable way to do it because they're peaches, they're browns, there's some pinks in here, a little bit of like a purpley pink in here. And it's like the perfect way to like jump into color without like going completely fully into color. I think it's a fun concept. But I do find, and I can't wait to do swatch comparisons between some of the palettes that I pulled out to see if I really do have some of these Natasha Denona shades in these other Natasha Denona eyeshadow palettes. And these are just ones that I was thinking of, like the purples and the pinks and like the peachier tones. And I do have a lot more of the Natasha Denona eyeshadows than just the ones that I pulled out. But I think it's a beautiful palette. Do I think it was worth $69? I don't have any really like thoughts on the palette today other than that it performed really, really well. I do enjoy the color story. I think it's going to be really fun for me to use because I'm not really a colorful person. I don't like a lot of like colorful eyeshadow, but I definitely think it's like a comfortable way for me to go into more colorful eyeshadow looks. And I do love pink is like almost a neutral. I think that they're really easy and they translate nicely on the eye as like a neutral. And I really like the look that I created today. So that's my thoughts right now. It'll be included in a speed review and I will give you guys my unfiltered thoughts and opinions then, but that's my thoughts for now.